are all about developing your skill set. I would have played scrum half when I was 15, 16, on the wing when I started out as a 12-year-old. I played 15 for the first time ever for the Lions back in 2001. So I think it's really important that you don't pigeonhole it. You don't just pick one position.
Hello, Brian. My name is Robert O'Leary. What's your favourite stadium that you played in outside Ireland, and what's your least favourite stadium that you played outside Ireland?
Good question. Favourite outside of Ireland, definitely the Millennium Stadium. Loved playing in the Millennium Stadium. It's just incredible atmosphere.
Hi, I'm John Murphy, and my question for you is, do you find it hard criticising players while commentating, because you got criticised yourself playing rugby?
I do find it hard criticising players. I think when I was a player, I knew when I had a poor game, and I knew when the criticism was going to come. And all I could ever ask was that pundits didn't make it personal. But when I go and I'm critical for someone, it's only about their performance, and I try and spin it a particular way as well, where someone doesn't throw a good pass. Maybe in the early days I would have said that's a poor quality pass for Jonathan Sexton, whereas nowadays I might say that's a very uncharacteristic pass from Jonathan Sexton. So there's lots of ways of trying to be able to soften it.
The OTB Kids Takeover, Episode 1, Brian O'Driscoll.
That was Episode 1 of the Kids Takeover here in Off the Ball. We will have more victims on the way very shortly over the coming weeks, so keep an eye out for that. If you've got kids at home and they want to ask certain sports people a question, that is the plan over the coming weeks. Now, we're turning to review the Sunday sports pages. We have Vincent Hogan of the Irish Independent and Kieran Shannon of the Irish Examiner with us. Vincent, you can hear me okay?
I can, Joe. Sorry that you're dealing with a Luddite this morning, but I'm afraid it's been a bit of a struggle.
It's been a historic day, everyone. Vincent Hogan has set up a Skype account, especially for us, so well done.
Absolutely.
And Kieran Shannon, you're there loud and clear. Hello.
Hi, Joe. Good to hear from you.
Yes, great to have you with us. I'll start with the back pages and then we'll get stuck in. So I have the Sunday Mirror Sport here first, and it's Pep Guardiola, City risk assessment. So Manchester City fully committed, they say, to finishing the season, but refuse to play again until they're giving a 100% guarantee from the government that the COVID-19 crisis is over. I suspect they'll be waiting for 100%, but that's where they are. Sunday World, Kate expectations rather. This is news that the Katie Taylor-Amanda Serrano world title fight expected to be officially postponed tomorrow. And then beneath that, cash crisis for GAA. Sean McGoldrick here. The GAA faces a short-term financial meltdown as doubts grow over whether the All-Ireland Championships will be played this summer. Goes on to make the point that last year the GAA grossed just under €48 million in Championship gate receipts, including the €3 million bonus of the All-Ireland football final replay. So that obviously is unlikely to happen this year. The Sun then, a man for all seasons. This is Alexander Sefrin, UEFA boss, who is saying that the 2019-20 season is, quote, probably lost, is his assessment of what will happen in the footballing world across Europe. I have the Sunday Times next then is the main section, and the front page, FAI staff kick up fuss over Mazar's report. We'll touch on this story. It's on the bottom left corner here. Mark Tye and Paul Rowan have a few pieces from the Mazar's report, which the FAI commissioned last year. Back page of the Mail on Sunday then, picture of Andy Farrell, Ireland Oz Tour doomed. No great surprise to anybody but Shane McGrath here with the story. Reports from Australia yesterday claiming the summer tour down under for Andy Farrell is doomed. And their main story is revolution. Pay cuts for Premier stars. Ronaldo and Messi give up millions. Fears the top flight are not insured for their £762 million penalty. And big clubs to bail out lower leagues. Obviously lots happening in the financial world of football just now. And then the Sunday Independent. A brilliant picture of a lone jogger at sunset. Oh, brother, where art thou? When the great communal gatherings of this sporting life begin to reassemble, we will know for sure that the healing has begun. And that leads into a piece by Tommy Conlon there on the front page. Just to kick off the general state of play for a moment, the Sunday Independent main section. As he did last week, I think Brendan O'Connor manages to catch the general mood, fellas. He says, there is a fragility bubbling close beneath the surface of our restless keeping calm and carrying on. FaceTime with Granny, virtual drinks with friends on house party, the kids on Zoom with their friends, exercising with Joe Wicks, walking, talking to each other about our smaller and smaller lives in which we have more and more in common. Moments of togetherness as we clap tearfully outside our doors for health workers whom we worry are cannon fodder. That's all very well, but it doesn't take much to bring the sadness and the fear to the surface. We are on edge. The slightest thing can kick us off. And I think that probably captures the mood, Vincent, for a lot of people just now. These are just the most surreal and difficult times.
We're certainly on edge, Joe. In my lifetime, I'm actually 60 next Saturday, and I can never remember anything in my lifetime like this. There's a huge degree of anxiety, and I think particularly when you see the figures in ICU mounting so rapidly, and the response of Tony Holohan and his people, and how they're trying to get a hold of this, but it's right across the globe, obviously, and it's a unique situation for us.
Kieran, what are you observing, or what's striking you?
Yeah, like just how there were some good lines in Brendan's piece. It is that I was writing about it myself during the week. It was one of those weeks, rare weeks, where you don't know where to what to write about, because this is, and as I said, like anybody who writes about sport at the moment is in this dilemma of, do you write about this, or do you not write about this? Because we're going to be going through the papers now, and there's some fantastic pieces, bits of sports writing this weekend. But you do feel like so much of whatever about sports writing, or what you might be writing about, is so marginal compared to, or irrelevant, or compared to what really matters right now. That you're reading the front pages much more than you would have, maybe you would have turned to the back page first. I mean, you referenced Brendan's piece there on the front page of Sunday Independent today. I was just looking at a pure the Mail on Sunday front page today, where it's looking like they're saying that there could be up to 62,000 people carrying COVID-19 right now. How it's looking like it'll be well at least into June, that this lock-in will extend to. So it's strange, challenging times, and yet we are, and the sports pages reflect it, where we're seeing the best of people too. And as challenging a moment as it is for society, we're seeing maybe a more caring society and a more caring government. By time, and it's just a shame that it's taken something like this for people's priorities to align.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, that, because things which have been done in the last couple of days would have taken years and an effective political revolution to happen otherwise.
Yeah, just looking at the sports pages, and I said all of them, okay, they're trimmer sports sections, but there's very little fat. They all have very, it's a really strong sports writing this weekend, but probably the strongest page of the lot, I thought, was probably the Sunday Times J page, and the interview with Tom Devine was the lead on it, which Dennis Walsh got, the now former Waterford hurler who has come back from being in New Zealand to help out on the front line with the medical services. And, it's in the piece up near the top, it reminds you that the government pleaded for for the likes of Tom, or our medical people who would have been trained through our system here to come back and help with the cause, it brought home to me that, like, how we've treated our doctors and our student nurses through the years. They've now our student nurses are rightly getting paid. As we know, our nurses have been underpaid for decades. Our health services have been under-resourced for decades. And, you know, I interviewed at the start of the year the Turin and Mayo hurler, Cathal Freeman, who would have also been on the fringes of the Mayo football panel years ago. Just when Turin were in the All-Ireland intermediate club semi-final. I met him in UL, where he's gone back in his late 20s to study medicine. He's a fantastic person, and great views on Jay and sense of community it brings and hurling in the Hitherlands. But one thing that came along, and I don't know if it actually made the piece because we were kind of straying into personal. I've known Cathal for a long time, but him going back to medicine and him saying, like, well, you know, we're just going to be going abroad here. Like that's what the Irish medical system does, the health system does, where we train really good doctors and nurses, and then so many of them have to go because we haven't prioritized them through the years. And, you know, the line has been used by the Taoiseach, by various, I think Malachy Clerkin did a fantastic piece about his experience going to get tested in Croke Park, where, you know, we've got to be using the words heroes more sparingly, and that they're not all in our sports fields, but a lot of the time they're in the hospital. And someone like Tom Devine is it both ways. So here is this guy who was doing his travelling, was in New Zealand, had been in Australia as well, I think, taken in, and now he's helping out. This is the real battle. We use that word battle a lot when it comes to particularly the gladiatorial warrior game that is hurling, but Tom Devine is really now a warrior and a hero. And, you know, maybe as a society that this isn't just a short term, we've got to put a higher premium on these people, because we now realise all the more how dependent we are on them.
Yeah, it's very true. A lot of people have made that point, and it was a sobering moment, to say the least, Vincent, I think on Friday, when it emerged that one of the deaths was a healthcare worker.
Very sobering, John. I'm sorry I missed most of what Kieran said there, but absolutely, my own sister was a healthcare worker for years, and you know, it's incredible, you know, the selflessness of these people, and so many of them coming out of retirement, and so many of them, like Tom Devine, coming back, you know, from New Zealand to put themselves in the front line and take on the risks, daily risks, really. When I suppose the penny is really only dropping for those of us who are staying at home, and that's our penance, is to stay at home for 2 weeks and just, you know, try to overdose on Netflix. That's what we're doing. And I read, you know, Kieran mentioned Malachy's piece there about going and getting tested, and it's just so sobering to think of the risk they're taking. And you know, this lovely gesture that we had during the week of everyone applauding the health workers, and I just wonder, have we paid enough attention to these people? You know, 2 months ago, a lot of the people who are being very pious about them now and saying they should be treated better, were they even interested 2 months ago?
It's a fair question. Tom Devine, the headline on the piece is former Waterford hurler Devine is coming home from New Zealand to help tackle coronavirus in Ireland. So he's been out in New Zealand for the last number of years. He played under Derek McGrath. Seems like an incredibly impressive 24-year-old. He has been out in New Zealand for 5 months with his girlfriend, who's a speech and language therapist. They had no thoughts of coming home or plans to come home. But then he heard the call, Ireland's call as it's been called, and he said, there's a group of 5 lads that I'm friends with from home, based in Perth. We did a road trip around the South Island of New Zealand last week. 4 of us are going home now. And something he mentions as well, just a small point, but in addition to giving up their plans to come home, all of them are paying massive money for flights. You know, he was talking about just the expense of getting home and paying for the one-way tickets. So he's done that, and he's coming home, and he'll be putting in 60, 70-hour weeks, he suspects. And does seem, Kieran, towards the end, you get a sense of him as a person, as a hurler as well, because Dennis Walsh writes that Devine's last year on the Waterford panel was in 2018, also Derek McGrath's final year. The 5 years he had shared with the group had clearly affected him. And when it was over, Devine wrote McGrath a letter, part of which McGrath shared at the GAA conference, a coaching conference 15 months ago. And so the letter that Devine had written to McGrath said, Aside from hurling, you're a key figure and a positive influence on the lives of 30 or so young men, myself included, in our transition from boys to young men. Tig de Burka, one of my closest friends, has often said you're like a second father to him, and your values have had a strong influence on me as well. And he's 24 now, so I make it, 15 months ago he was 22, 23. An incredible letter for a 22, 23-year-old to write to his former coach. So that's one impressive man coming home, Kieran, to help with the fight now.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's a guy who has, I suppose, he has always known where hurling is in the hierarchy. He made the tough call, and it's in the piece where, after the league 2017 and, Waterford, when Waterford got to the All-Ireland that year, Tom was not involved. He was in Ghana at the time. So, as a student doctor, and even when he came back in 2018, and you mentioned Derek McGrath, and again, someone who sees, and I know he's got the barbs through the years about being seen to be almost overly player-centered, and I suppose that ethos is more prevalent now, but it still has its skeptics. And how Derek McGrath brought him back, or made sure that he had a banquet ticket for the All-Ireland, got him a ticket for the All-Ireland. Tom came home for that, and it was involved in 2018, but he just realised it's just impossible to be a county player and do the hours that doctors are expected to do. And again, that's another thing that we as a society, when we get back to some kind of normality, having gone through this abnormality, is the hours we're expecting of the people who are on the front line. It's just not right, the amount of hours. And it's not so that Tom Devine necessarily can play inter-county hurling, but like the hours he was talking about, how, in 1 week he was doing a 96-hour week. Like, how can you try and fit anything, let alone inter-county hurling, in to the rest of your life under that schedule? But as you said, a very impressive man, and who is all the better, which he touched on in the piece with Derek McGrath. He's all the better for sport, for having been involved in a setup like that, and in a sport like hurling. And the people of Waterford and the people of Ireland are going to need the Tom Devines, and we should be very grateful for them, whether they came home or they were here all along, and that we don't take them for granted anymore.
Vincent, you can hear us okay, can you? I see you looking at your headphones there down the screen. You're struggling.
No, I'm missing most of it. Is it possible to get me on just a normal phone line, Joe, and just...
We'll figure something out during the news headlines. That's the best thing. Can you hear you? But yeah, you're hearing me a little bit now, are you?
I can hear you now, yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll sort something out during the news, and we'll get you set up properly for the bulk of the chat. On Tom Devine, what jumped out at you in that piece?
Well, again, just an incredibly mature person for 24. And I remember him as a kind of a game-breaking substitute that Derek McGrath used to use him. But one of the things that jumps out at me, firstly, is that if you're serious about a profession like the medical profession, the idea of reconciling it with the modern life of an inter-county footballer is, Kieran was making the point there that just in terms of having a life with those hours and the stresses that they endure must be incredible. But to have an inter-county life outside of that, it's just not practical. But I see where he talks about in 2017, where Waterford were embarking on a journey that would take them to the All-Ireland final. And he mentions being in a fishing village in Ghana. And his description of that, it really brings home to me something that I think the WHO are really, really frightened of. When you see some of the best health systems in the world really creaking under the weight of COVID-19, this hasn't really kicked off in Africa to a huge extent yet. But a lot of the most impoverished countries, if this gets loose in those countries, we're going to see body bags piling up. And, Tom's description of the fishing village, there was one physician's assistant who wasn't the best in the world. We were only medical students, so we couldn't do that much, but you did what you could. I'd hope to go back at some stage with a bit more resources behind me and a bit more training to help a bit more.
Have we lost you? I think we have. We'll get Vincent Hogan.
Malarial. I mean, that's terrifying.
Sorry, you're back now. We briefly lost you. Yeah, you just finish that last point, Vincent. You just broke up at the last two sentences there.
Yeah, I was just talking about, he describes them having fuck all medications, 2 choices of antibiotic, 1 antipsychotic, 1 anti-malarial. You think of that in the context of what may be coming to these villages. It's terrifying.
No, it sure is. It doesn't bear thinking about. I mean, I've heard contrasting points on that. Like Michael Ryan in the WHO was saying that Africa is maybe a bit more practiced at dealing with certain outbreaks like this, serious public health outbreaks like the Ebola crisis of a number of years ago. But he still ultimately said it's unprepared really to deal with the current situation. We'll take a short ad break. We'll get news headlines, and then Vincent will sort you out in a better mic or line, and we'll crack on with the papers in just 1 minute.
Do you know that auctioneers, estate agents, letting agents and property management agents must be licensed by the Property Services Regulatory Authority? An auctioneer may auction land, fine arts, antiques, cars or animals at a mart. When engaging your agent, don't assume your agent is licensed. Check the Register of Licensees at psr.ie. Report unlicensed operators to the PSRA. Remember, no PSRA licence, no consumer protection.
It's finally here. The electric car that charges you less. Much less. Introducing the new Renault Zoe, Ireland's most affordable electric car with a range of 395 kilometres, saving you a minimum of €9,000 versus other long-range electric cars. The new Renault Zoe, starting from €26,990. The affordable electric vehicle for every day. Visit your local Renault dealer today. Price excludes delivery and related charges. See Renault.ie.
Lawn moss? Not a problem. Apply Zero Lawn Liquid now in your lawn. I'm Porry Corkin, garden expert on Pat Kenny's programme, and I use Zero Lawn Liquid on my own lawn. Zero kills moss overnight, Zero is easy to apply and very fast acting. Apply Zero to your lawn now for a moss-free, rich green lawn this spring. Zero Lawn Liquid is now available online at horkins.ie for a direct delivery to your home. For a moss-free lawn this spring, apply Zero Lawn Liquid
This
now.
is an important safety message from Dunnes Stores. To keep our customers and colleagues safe, we ask that where possible, you go alone to your nearest Dunnes Stores. Avoid rush hour and spend as little time as possible in the shop. Stay the recommended distance of 2 metres away from others and be patient in queues. If you were shopping on behalf of others and need help, please ask. Please protect and respect store teams who continue to provide an important service. Use contactless payment where possible. Thanks for your understanding. Dunnes Stores, always there for our customers.
At Electric Ireland, we're here to help 1.2 million homes save on their energy costs by lowering prices from the 1st of April. Every customer will benefit, with up to €100 in annual savings for homes with gas and electricity. That's millions more in pockets across the country. On top of lower prices, our customers will still enjoy a discount rate that doesn't disappear. Find out more about what we're doing for our customers at electricireland.ie, because we're brighter together. Prices valid from 1st of April 2020, subject to change. EAB €1,636, based on average annual consumption, urban 24-hour discounted unit rate, standing charge, PSO levy and carbon tax. Residential dual fuel direct debit and online billing. T's and C's apply. See electricireland.ie/EAB. Savings based on annual consumption.
Right now, we all deserve a good dose of kindness. That's why Boots would like to thank our amazing colleagues for their ongoing commitment. For over 23 years, we've supported our communities and kept our pharmacies open. Our colleagues are here to support you with medicines, prescriptions and trusted advice. So please help them while they do their best to help you. Keep safe. Keep being kind. Share your Boots Kind stories, pictures and messages using #PrescribeKindness. Thank you and stay safe from Boots.
COVID-19 is a major public health emergency here in Ireland and around the world. It's having a big impact on the way we live our lives, how we stay connected as communities, and how we use open spaces. If you are planning on heading out into the fresh air, here are 5 things to remember. 1. Stay local, within 2 kilometres of home. 2. Keep a distance of 2 metres from others. 3. Go out with members of your own household only. 4. Always enjoy the outdoors with consideration and respect for the people you meet along the way. And 5. Wash your hands before you leave home, and always observe coughing and sneezing etiquette. Find out more at gov.ie. Supported by the Government of Ireland.
Hello, you're through to the Women's Aid Helpline. Thanks to your continued support and our staff and volunteers, the Women's Aid National Free Phone Helpline continues to provide free and confidential support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Call 1800 341 900 or online chat at womensaid.ie. Women's Aid. Listening, believing, supporting.
ICYMI. In case you missed it. On News Talk.
You've woken up with scratches, perhaps bite marks.
Yeah, I've woken up with scratches and marks in my body that I can't explain. I was living in probably one of the most active parts of the house at the time. The only reason why I was living there is because it was like my own wee flat. So I had like my bedroom, my bathroom, and downstairs was my kitchen and stuff. So I was a teenager at this stage. I wanted my own space. And to me, like I knew it was kind of a scary part of the house type. But when I moved in, I started to kind of get these attacks then there. So it was mainly the attacks that side of the house that I was getting. Right. My sister, then later on in the years when I moved out of there, my sister moved in and she got these same attacks in that area of the house. Whenever we had these groups in, paranormal groups and stuff, when we had them in too, they got the same attacks. They were leaving with scratch marks and even burn marks, like welts kind of on their body. We have evidence, photographic evidence of this, because for me then it's like it's validation that it is an attack that I can't understand, that, you know, that's in the physical world. I think it's something that's beyond my understanding and our understanding.
Hear the full Moncrief podcast at newstalk.com and on the Newstalk app. Across Ireland. This is the IMRO Radio Awards Station of the Year. This is Newstalk.
It's 2 o'clock. Good afternoon. I'm Stephen Murphy. The HSE says the peak of the coronavirus pandemic in Ireland could be in less than 2 weeks. It's predicting the number of cases here could reach its height between the 10th and 14th of April. So far, over 2,400 people have tested positive in the Republic. The HSE has today unveiled plans to turn the City West Convention Complex in Dublin into a healthcare facility for COVID-19 patients. It'll have room for over 1,000 people if capacity runs out in hospitals. CEO Paul Reid says there's two parts to it.
One is isolation, and to support people in isolation, and the second, which is temporary, securing temporary beds for people who are stepping down from probably more acute hospital care, but not quite ready to return home.
Well, the HSE has also confirmed that an app is being developed to assist with contact tracing. It'll be an opt-in system and will send out an alert to people close to a confirmed case. The Data Protection Commission is working through GDPR issues, but it is expected to be available within 10 days. HSE Communications Director Paul Connors says it'll help their efforts to tackle the virus.
This isn't just the HSE, we're involved in it heavily. This is a cross-government effort in relation to a very important piece of technology and fighting COVID-19.
Spain, one of the countries worst affected by the coronavirus pandemic, has seen its highest number of deaths recorded in 24 hours. A further 838 people there have lost their lives after contracting COVID-19. In some other news, a man is due in court around now, charged in connection with aggravated burglary and false imprisonment in Cork yesterday morning. The man in his 20s broke into a house in the Carrigaline area where he held a woman captive and threatened her with a kitchen knife. He left the house after 2 hours and was arrested by Gardaí. The woman was not injured in the incident. And 8 people have been rescued by emergency services after a fire in Dublin. The blaze broke out at an apartment block in Mulhuddart this morning. 6 units of Dublin Fire Brigade and 3 ambulances attended the scene. Ladders were used to rescue 8 of the residents, who were then treated at the scene before being taken to hospital. It's 2 minutes past 2.
News Talk weather.
Thanks to the AA. Need to renew your AA home insurance? Go to the aa.ie/myAA.
Cold today, but sunny as well. Highs of 8 degrees in the north and east, up to 12 degrees everywhere else. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
Off the ball. This is News Talk.
Now you're welcome back. We're going to continue the papers. We have Kieran Shannon of the Irish Examiner still with us and Vincent Hogan of the Irish Independent. Vincent, you can hear us a bit better? You're there?
Yes, I can hear you, Joe.
Yes, great, okay, great. Sometimes the old technology is the most reliable. So, let's get through a few pieces then. The Mail on Sunday, Michael Dagnan jumped out to all three of us, I'm sure. You start off reading his piece and it seems like it will be relatively in keeping with the general thrust of what many columnists are writing about. He says, the first thing I'd say is that all GAA activities pale into insignificance at a time like this. We still don't know what we're really facing. We're looking across the world at people dying. It's unprecedented and terribly sad. He then says, it's just such an unusual time for us all. And in the midst of all the strangeness and sadness, I had to bury my father last week. And at that point, you realise that his 2-page column in the Mail on Sunday is going to be a personal one and a different one. To give you an abridged version of what happened, Michael writes, in the middle of all this is a bit later on in the piece where he had been talking about the effect on GAA and Offaly GAA. Obviously, Michael has gone in as County Board Chairman last December. He said, in the middle of all that, on March 16th, my dad died. It was a Monday. My father, Pather, 85, a very fit man who'd never been in hospital for a night in his life, luckily enough. There's 6 of us in the family, all spread around the place. None of us are at home. I have a brother in Canada, 2 sisters in Dublin, 1 in Sallins. We're all fit and well, thank God. I got a call from my mother the previous Wednesday saying he hadn't been well for a couple of days. So I ended up bringing him into hospital that night. Michael writes, I won't go into every puck of the ball, but he was serious for a few days. He went into intensive care. It wasn't virus related. He had a problem with blood supply to the bowel. They operated on Thursday night. He seemed to make a strong recovery, even though his blood pressure was low. He was as tough as nails, a slight man, but very strong. By Saturday morning, he was sitting out of the bed and having a cup of tea. My mother got in to see him. He then later writes, on Saturday evening, I got a call to say he was being released from ICU and going into a ward. Michael then writes, unfortunately, I got another call. By the time I got in, he was dead. So our condolences, I'm sure, from all three of us to Michael Dagnan and his family.
Absolutely.
And at that point, Kieran, it becomes a very personal piece. I mean, personal already, obviously, up to that point, but he talks about the very, very, very strange aspect of grieving and marking the passing of a loved one in the current circumstances.
Yeah, because it's been, I mean, we've seen the odd bit on social media. There was that funeral in, was it West Kerry, where the community just stood in respect for a member of the community who was just deceased. But the front page, I think, of one of the editions of the Sunday Times was up in Derry Lynn, where my father's from, and how a husband couldn't attend the funeral of his own wife. Michael's is, and of course we know Michael as in, I've never interviewed Michael, but obviously I have in a previous lifetime back in the mid-90s. But we know, all of Ireland, or any of us who are into sport, know of Michael Dagnan. I feel like we know him from the co-commentary. And for him to take us into his house and his family as to how the new grieving process works is very striking. Like, as you said, I didn't know what the piece was like. It was you who drew my attention. You've got to check out Michael Dagnan. And I suppose it's from the headline, all right, that the father aspect comes into it. But as you said, for the first 500 words, he's talking about his role. Like, Michael is a man with several hats on, including being the chairman of Offaly County Board. And he was talking about the certain processes and how that's going on that front. And then, as you said, it comes into the piece, and it's a very he blends in really nicely the man that his father was, and there's a bit of humour there as well. I think I would have heard him on some of the talk shows with you, or road shows with you, him talk before. I think you might have heard that line, Joe. I don't know if it was to yourself.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Yeah. Was it himself and Dahi might have been on and talking about their nerves before those All-Irelands in the mid-90s. There's good bit of humour there, where he was very nervous before I think it was the 94 All-Ireland, and he was conveying to his father about how he was struggling with eating and the nerves that he was feeling, and the father said, eat up, there's no point in making a fool of yourself in Croke Park and being hungry as well, So the sense of the man came across, and a sense of Michael as well. You know, the man has been through an awful lot. He wrote one of the most powerful autobiographies in terms of about his late wife Adele, and as I said, he's someone I don't particularly know and wouldn't always agree with, but I've always admired, and all the more for that. And no, it's a piece, like we've just touched on it, but it's, in fairness, it's and fair play to him, as well as the paper, that he was given scope, and he filled there. It must be a 2,500 word piece easily, and it's I'd urge people to go along and get the paper for that alone. It's a very strong, affecting piece.
Yeah, agreed. He says that his mother only had 2 very brief visits, which is very hard on her. When someone is that sick, normally you'd get a bit more time. And then he talked about the decision not to have anyone in the house apart from themselves, given what was going on. He said that included uncles and aunts and cousins, a hard decision, but one we felt was necessary. He writes, Vincent, about his father as well. My father worked long hours. He worked hard for his family. He handed over whatever few quid he got. He looked after all the work and things around the house. But Mum did everything outside the house, the banking, the doctor, the dentist. It might be different now, but every family had that split. They would have been 56 years married this year.
Yeah, I think what's lovely about this, Joe, is we actually get a sense of his father without knowing him, obviously. I think this will ring true for so many people in terms of Irish manhood. And the heading on the piece is, my dad never said it to me, but he was very proud. I knew he was. And I'm reminded of when my own dad was dying in 2002, and I was basically living down in Nina to bring him on drives and into the regional hospital in Limerick. And I remember one day the matron in the regional hospital in Limerick said to me, you know your dad is dying. And I said, yes, I do. And she said, you should tell him you love him. And I thought long and hard about that. And I never did tell him I loved him, for the very simple reason I felt it would make him deeply uncomfortable. He wasn't that type of man. He was someone who kept his emotions in check, who left it all to my mother to do exactly the way Michael describes his mother, taking them to matches and that. But what you get from the piece, and Michael's dad, Pater, was a Galway man. And there's a lovely sense of mischief when Michael was going to be playing against Galway in the Minor All-Ireland semi-final. He describes going to Mass that morning and coming home from Mass and looking up on the roof, and his dad had a Galway flag on the chimney. And it's little things like that though we didn't know him, and you know, obviously this was news to me. I actually was thinking about ringing Michael about something else, entirely else, different during the week, and I'm shocked to read the piece. But I think it's lovely in the sense that it conveys this kind of unspoken love between a father and a son, that as Irish men, certainly of my generation, and I suspect Michael, even though he's a bit younger, his generation too, we've always found it very difficult to communicate that love openly.
Yeah, I think everything you've just said there will resonate with a lot of people. And in the piece, Michael writes of his father, the things he did for me. You know, that's the sentence that jumped out at me more than anything, just a simple throwaway sentence, the things he did for me. And he goes on to give an example. He would have driven me back to Waterford when I was in college there on a Monday morning, driven back to make work for 8 a.m. himself. That was the way he was. And that is, Vincent, what you're talking about regarding the communication of love for a huge swathe of that generation.
Absolutely. He describes, you know, after a match, having a load of lads from Banagher after a few pints, and Michael describes it, I think there was 6 or 7 staying in the downstairs bedroom at home, and his father came in with a tray of whiskey, pure skullduggery, out to the kitchen then the next morning, and a big feed for everybody. The things he did for me, as you say. I mean, a kind of this unspoken thing that you know, you communicate through your acts, not through words, because words make us deeply uncomfortable. And I just think it's a lovely piece. We spoke on this program before, Joe, about, you know, him writing about Adele and the struggle to kind of not feel guilty about getting on with your life and being in a new relationship. And I just think it's a beautiful piece, because we've all seen those photographs that Kieran referred to. There's one that really sticks out, and I think it's in the Sunday Independent this morning, of a woman being buried, and the only people at the grave are the undertaker and the priest. And I can't think of a sadder image. And you know, Michael and his family have had this very, very private experience where they had his dad back in the house, but no uncles, no aunts, nobody. And there's a line in it where he says, it would have been a huge funeral. And, you know, this is the really, really deep sadness of what's going on, that people are being laid to rest in such kind of silence.
Yeah. We probably don't fully appreciate, Kieran, the trauma of that just yet, and the effects that that's going to have on all of us.
No, and even for those who mightn't be immediately close to the family, you know, the way you would always just pay your respect. Like, it's, as you said, that would have been a huge, it would have been a huge funeral. The first that I would have come across it, I guess, was the first column I would have written since, I suppose, the lock-in, or the, since it went to another level 2.5 weeks ago now, was when Dr. Aidan Moore and the sports psychologist, or the psychologist who would have specialised in sport, passed away. And it was the first time I saw on RIP.ie about how it was that there would be no, that it would just be pure, strictly family, that there would be no funeral service open to the public, and that there would be a memorial at a later date. And I suppose, like, because just I think it's important just to point out that, yeah, as Michael makes the point in the piece, that it was a different condition that his father passed away from, but obviously it affects whoever goes, that we are not able to have this celebration as well, or this acknowledgement or memorial, like, be it but going back to, you know, you just do hope that that there is a certain send-off, as much as I'm sure Michael's family are being, their respects are being conveyed in different forms.
Yeah.
There is just something, when you look back again, another thing we would just take for granted is that sense of a community being together. You know, there are, going on to maybe, or that point is mentioned in other articles, including...
I'll come to them in 1 second, Kieran. There was one last point I wanted to touch on in Michael Dagnan's piece, the very last point he makes. But first, Vincent, I don't want to pry, because the dilemma you had when your father was passing away, I would suspect, is a very common one. And you thought long and hard about whether to say it or not say it. And I think a lot of people instantly would understand what you mean when you reach the conclusion that to say it would have just made things very uncomfortable for your father, and why put that on him. Have you been happy with that decision, or do you regret it?
I don't regret it, Joe, because I'm fairly confident he knew I loved him. And I communicated my love, I suppose, particularly in the last 6 months when we knew he was dying. And I had a sports editor in The Independent, PJ Cunningham, who was incredibly supportive of me. So I basically lived down in Nina for the last 6 months of his life, and I drove him everywhere. And I remember one day there was a consultant in the regional being really, really abrupt and nasty with him, and I turned on him. And it was moments like that I knew he knew I had his back. And I have thought about it a lot since. Should I have said it? And I actually think no. I think it would have been really uncomfortable for him, and he didn't need it said. Now, that may sound very, very repressed to a lot of people listening in, and I can completely understand why they'd think that. But no, I'm pretty much at peace with it, Joe.
Yeah, no, I don't think it is repressed. I mean, I can see how people would reach that conclusion, but I think the greater majority of people will be able to identify with that, actually, to a very significant extent. To move to something less profound, but an issue that we may well discuss on this show, Kieran, over the coming years. And it has been discussed in GAA up until this point, but maybe if this is going to change us, these strange times we're living to, if they are going to have an impact on us, then this may be one of the aspects when it comes to the GAA. And it's in Michael Dagnan's final paragraph in his piece. He says, "I hope when all of this is all over, there'll be a discussion around what's important. Do we need the massive backroom teams, the training 7 nights a week? What's best for our overall welfare, all our players? We all realise at the time of death and funeral what's important. It's friends, it's family, it's community, it's human life, it's the vulnerable in our communities. Whatever happens in terms of matches and championship, I hope we can reset and recalibrate.
Yeah, like he's right in so many ways. It's and I suppose that theme is touched upon in some of the other pieces. I mentioned that Strachan J page that the Sunday Times had, and Mick Foley did two very good off-leads to Dennis's main piece with Tom Devine, and one of them was about Willie Hegarty. We know from he's involved in local media around the Shannonside area, around Lanford, Roscommon area, and about just when they meet people, is that, look, the games will be back. Let's just hope that there's as many of us back as possible. And there will be, and I think it's the outro of Tommy Conlon's piece as well, about that's how we'll know when we have a certain normality. But there is a time where it is a time to think of just how maybe manic it is, and maybe just how maybe out of control it's spiraled. It's been touched on in a few of the pieces and elsewhere about how, I think Michael actually was the one who said it, about how Michael Fenley and John Mahan, the respective managers that he's dealing with the senior inter-county teams in Offaly, have been very sensible on this, where, look, just the priorities are, right, if you're tipping alone on your own, great, but, there's other priorities right now. There's no such thing as, hey, we could be out, I don't know what Offaly's draw are, and what they were down to have as their first game in championship, whenever it was. They're just not thinking like that. And by the same, so there's all that. Like at the moment, sport, Joe, for me right now is just the back garden and the front drive with the kids now, just playing in the back garden, hurling, football, soccer, basketball, whatever. And in a way, even just the amount of times that we're swept off our feet going to everything at 6:30, there's always something every night. And there's a bit of you going, God, we're constantly on the go. But we'll be looking forward to that cranking up, obviously, because, you just take for granted so many things. Like just, I live here in, I suppose, Tony Kelly, Gary Brennan country here down in Ballyea, Clondagad, and just the normality of the hours gone forward today. Just a 6:30 on a Tuesday, Thursday, of the kids, 100 kids on the field, helping out with the local camogie team, the sun shining, saying hi to local neighbours. You miss that, as I said, you're swept off your feet, being involved with so much, and there's something to be good for being out in the back garden a bit more, but you miss the community being down in that field as well. And it looks like it's going to be a while, but it goes back to the Willie Hegarty line, as long as many of us as possible are down there. That's all that counts right now.
Vincent, Michael Foley on that Sunday Times page that Kieran mentions, he has the headline, "Under threat GAA left waiting, hoping and worrying," like so many sports, obviously. And he's talking about the future for this season. The byline is, "A retro knockout competition has become likely but will still be resisted." This is obviously going to cost the GAA a huge amount of money in gate receipts. I mean, this year will cost everybody a huge amount of money. Is there any word on what the most likely situation is for the inter-county championships at whatever stage this year they get underway?
No, Joe. I mean, I think it's a couple of weeks ago, Alan Milton was interviewed, and then Fergal McGill was interviewed this week, and there's actually a futility in asking them what's likely to happen, because nobody knows, and it's really just looking out into the dark. And right now, it almost seems distasteful to be talking about what we should do in terms of the championship. And Michael makes a very good point that he kind of talks about how there's this romantic view of the old knockout that it used to be, and so much fewer games, and how brilliant that would be if we had that this year, as if that one game and you're out model was somehow poetic to players. And it was actually a nightmare, and it was a dreadful thing to expect players to train for 6 months and then be gone after 70 minutes. And it just shows you how skewed our judgment can become when people are talking in this kind of romantic way about a straight knockout. I think what we're going to find is whenever normality returns and we can sit in Croke Park with a huge crowd around us, or down in Thurles with a huge crowd around us, or wherever, my God, we're going to have an appreciation of it like we've never had previously. And one of the sad aspects of, if you want to call it a lockdown that we have now, I was out walking the dog the other day, and I was coming around by the back of Benildes College, and they have a beautiful AstroTurf pitch at the back, and there were these 4 young fellas, 15 or 16-year-olds, and they're just kicking a ball to each other. And I remember thinking, that gate is going to have to be locked. Those poor guys are going to have to be told, you can't do that. And when you think of it, it's such a nice thing to see ordinarily, just kids on a pitch, kicking a ball, trying headers or whatever. But even that is out of bounds now. Like the hurling wall down in Crokes has to be locked so that people don't congregate. And this is the sadness of it, that even our young people, they're stuck inside playing video games now. And I just think that, and I'm not sure we'll have a championship this year, but whenever we do, my God, we're going to appreciate it.
I know, in my quieter moments at home, Kieran, we're making lists of things we're looking forward to doing. We planned out our perfect Saturday yesterday when we were on our walk. That's the kind of thing you're talking about.
Yeah, that is it. And, you know, Vincent touched on a few points there, you know, that Michael's piece triggers. That I remember actually speaking to Michael on the day down that before it went to another level, let's say, was it on the Thursday morning, the schools were closed.
Yeah.
On that Tuesday, I was up interviewing John Rudd, the performance director of Swim Ireland, and we were at that stage where instead of shaking hands, we were doing the elbow bump, which is now gone as well. But on the way down, I still had to finish my column, and it was on just how things were changing, you know, and how the league was still scheduled to you know, it was 2 days later. Michael and myself were just speculating about what was likely to happen, and you know, because Michael is particularly au fait with the history of the association, having done the bloodied field, you know, we were just talking about I suppose how championships have historically been done at the time of crisis, and it informed a lot of my column where I talked about where we could be back to an old school do or die knockout championship, because the J has technically an obligation, or sorry, it hasn't had an obligation, but it's almost felt historically like it has one, to run off a championship, even if it's 2 years later. The 1920 championship was run off in 1922. So it's nearly like it's ingrained in the J psyche institutionally that we will have a 2020 championship. But as I touched on in that column that was all over the place last Thursday, and I think Tomas Shea was making the point in Vincent's paper yesterday, that so what if there's not a 2020 championship? But then again, the people are, as you say, people sway around, and there's even, like you see on forums like Twitter, people speculating about what a do or die would do. There could be, and again, when it seems so peripheral now, there could be some, because of the tight time frame they're dealing with, there could be something to have something that people are looking forward to, that they feel that the games are back, even if it's in the autumn, that we have, as Vincent mentioned, that communal experience of whether being in Thurles or looking on in a Thurles or wherever, of having some form of championship, and if it needs to be knockout. But I've seen some other figures say, oh, well, is that not the way maybe we should go all the way? As Vincent and Michael have made the point just there, and I was making it online myself during the week, that we can't romanticize what those eras were like, because you know, the old do or die and teams. I remember interviewing Paul Brewster of Fermanagh, and he had won his first championship game in 7 years, and he talked about, you know, I now finally played into June, you know, it was my first time playing into June, and that next year maybe we can maybe play into July. This notion of playing 7 years of an inter-county career, having never played a second game, we can't go overboard on romanticising the past as well.
No, we don't have to go back to that for sure, and nobody's advocating that becomes the norm. But I must say, I do think come autumn time, if things are relatively back to normal and if it's safe and public health officials sign off and everything, what more beautiful therapeutic thing could we do than get together in Thurles and Porkyqueeve and Castlebar and all the grounds around the country and have a knockout championship as a one-off year. The players haven't been training, week in, week out at the moment. They're on a lockdown the same as everybody else. I think it would be the perfect kind of therapy for everyone. And the games itself and who wins the All-Ireland is an irrelevance to me. But I think for everybody in those communities to go to their local GAA ground for a knockout match together would be a wonderful way to segue back to normality.
Yeah, I think it would nearly have to be different to other years, because it has been such a different year. And as you say, it would be the whole, if you had that, it would be just it would be our own form. If I see it was cancelled in the States, obviously the March Madness, that old knockout and just games come in the next week and it's run off. It could be highly exciting as a certain novelty to it. But the other point you made, and Vincent was making, I was having this conversation with an inter-county manager during the week. We were just talking about loads of things, and he was talking about just the local club field. He was just wondering, has the GAA gone for that too soon? That could there be a way of kids just being able to, in pairs, knock a ball around? You could have 8 to 10 kids on a field. There could be somebody within the club that coordinates it, etc. Because, he was thinking of people in his own community and how just for their own mental health being cooped up, how they need that. And but and that's going back to Vincent's point. He just said, and you're seeing then, kids congregating at corners.
But the short answer to that surely is very simple. Absolutely no, they shouldn't be on GAA pitches. And the kids congregating at corners, I hope the Gardaí get onto them and get them back in their homes straight away.
And that's where it would be impossible to manage. And that's what I did say to him, that, because the notion that, you stay there, it just would be, it just wouldn't be manageable. But it is going back to Vincent's point, it is something that we just took so simple. The local field is locked.
No, it's definitely a symbolic kind of moment when you see them being closed. We're going to take a very short break. We're going to come back with a piece in the Sunday Times. Kieran, I know you picked this out. Mazars questioned ex-FAI boss's former girlfriend. The Mazars investigation continues, and Paul Rowan and Mark Tighe have a few snippets from that report and some quotes from FAI officials. So we're going to come back with that in just 1 second.
Off the ball on News Talk. The Pat Kenny Show.
We had Alistair Campbell on the show yesterday. You may know that Alistair is a great exponent of the bagpipes, and he posted this for us on Twitter.
There you go, Pat. That'll do for you. I want on News Talk tomorrow.
The Pat Kenny Show.
With Jaguar.
Weekdays at 9 a.m. on News Talk.
Well done, Pat. Well done, Alistair. That bagpipe rendition has killed every living thing, including viruses, within earshot of my radio.
COVID-19 is a major public health emergency here in Ireland and around the world. It's having a big impact on the way we live our lives, how we stay connected as communities, and how we use open spaces. If you are planning on heading out into the fresh air, here are 5 things to remember. 1. Stay local, within 2 kilometres of home. 2. Keep a distance of 2 metres from others. 3. Go out with members of your own household only. 4. Always enjoy the outdoors with consideration and respect for the people you meet along the way. And 5. Wash your hands before you leave home, and always observe coughing and sneezing etiquette. Find out more at gov.ie. Supported by the Government of Ireland.
The Punchestown Festival. It's for city, country, village and town.
It's epic sport, the style scene, and everything in between. It's live music, great crack, and buzzing bars. It's for champions and horse racing heroes. It's a celebration of Irish sporting excellence. It's 5 magic days in one very special place. It's the Punchestown Festival, 28th of April to 2nd of May. Tickets from €30. Punchestown, it's your kind of town.
It's finally here. The electric car that charges you less. Much less. Introducing the new Renault Zoe, Ireland's most affordable electric car with a range of 395 kilometres, saving you a minimum of €9,000 versus other long-range electric cars. The new Renault Zoe, starting from €26,990. The affordable electric vehicle for every day. Visit your local Renault dealer today. Price excludes delivery and related charges. See Renault.ie.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Next of kin.
Next of kin who?
Next of kin who thinks they can make decisions for you.
Many people believe that next of kin is someone who can make healthcare decisions or access your bank accounts and assets if you are unable to give consent. Next of kin simply means someone I would like contacted in an emergency.
For more information, log on to sageadvocacy.ie. Sage Advocacy. Nothing about you without you.
Did you know that if you supply new or used cars or light commercial vehicles to drivers in the Republic of Ireland, you have a legal obligation under end-of-life vehicle regulations? That's where ELVS can help, by providing you with the most cost-effective option to ensure you're compliant. Visit elvs.ie for your motor dealer application form. ELVS. Driving car recycling forward.
Hey everyone, just a quick message from Lidl. The current situation in Ireland is challenging for everyone. So we'd like to take a moment to reassure you, our valued customers, of our confidence in our wonderful suppliers who are keeping our deliveries coming, and our incredible teams of staff who are working to make sure our stores are stocked for you. All 163 Lidl stores across Ireland remain open, so please remember, look after yourselves and we'll look after the shelves. Lidl, more for you.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Welcome back. We have Vincent Hogan of the Irish Independent with us and Kieran Shannon of the Irish Examiner. Lads, it's on the front page of the Sunday Times, but if you turn to page 11, there's a fuller piece as well. Mazars questioned ex-FAI boss's former girlfriend. There are various reports, obviously, surrounding the activities of the FAI. There is the Cozy report, which has been referred to Gardaí and not been published. And there is the Mazars report, which was commissioned by the FAI into their own affairs. Obviously, for legal reasons, we'll have to be very careful here and just stick to the facts. But to bring people what's in the papers, it seems Paul Rowan and Mark Tighe here have some insight into what is in the Mazars report and investigation. It includes an interview with Susan Keegan. Susan Keegan is John Delaney's former girlfriend, who they say in the report is now said to be embarrassed and ashamed that she was ever involved with the former FAI chief executive. They're her words in the report. There have been allegations of payments totaling €95,000 made to her by the FAI on the basis that she had been hired as a match agent. Keegan, it seems, has told investigators that she did receive a cheque from Delaney, possibly issued from an FAI account in late 2012 for about €10,000 so that she could buy a new car, but thought nothing more of it. Again, that has to be fully confirmed. John Delaney did not cooperate with this investigation, nor did Michael Cody, the former honorary secretary. Keegan is believed to be the only individual not directly connected with the FAI who was interviewed by Mazars. Mazars have spoken to more than 20 people. The Sunday Times had revealed last year that the FAI accountancy system had recorded a €60,000 payment in professional fee payments in the name of Susan Keegan in late 2013 and 2014. Additional payments of €35,000 in Keegan's name have since been discovered. There is still a question mark over the exact nature of these payments. She has subsequently moved to Spain and is living there now. And that, Vincent Hogan, is about where we are. This is an early snippet of the Mazars investigation, but no more than that for the time being.
No, and the thing that strikes me, Joe, is this is someone who, you know, because she was in a relationship with a certain person, we all know her name and we feel we have a right to know things about her. And that's the thing that strikes me very powerfully here, that, you know, her name is out there. I've no idea what she got or what the circumstances in which she got it from John Delaney. If the FAI accounts suggest 95,000 went towards her, and obviously she says she only got 10 to change her car, whatever, begs the question where the other 85,000 went. But these are all questions that, will hopefully be answered in the midst of time. But, there's almost a bizarre dimension to this, to see a quote from her where she says that the closest she came to working for the FAI was when she gave dance lessons to Delaney at the apartment they shared in Malahide before he took part in Strictly Come Dancing style charity event with the model Nadia Ford in 2013. Now, you could almost find that funny if it wasn't so, in my opinion, almost unfair in invading this woman's privacy. I just think there's something. She's almost becoming a figure of fun in this, and whatever John Delaney got up to, and whatever dysfunctional organisation the FAI became under his watch, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with reading this.
Okay, that's fair enough. Kieran?
Yeah, no, I think Vincent's right to make the point about the person who is being brought into all this, Susan Keegan, and I think it's important to say that in the inside it's a piece on the front page, but it also then there's a more thorough piece on page 11 inside, and in its intro she makes the point that she is now said to be, quote, embarrassed and ashamed that she was ever involved with the former FAI chief executive. I suppose the other thing that's striking is it's not news, but just the scale of is the lack of internal scrutiny and financial controlling that was prevalent at the time at the association, because there are quotes from Tony Dagnan, who was the finance director at the time, who is supposed to be highly critical of this current draft, and he says, "I strongly dispute these findings. Payments were approved by the CEO and a number of senior members of the board," and he continues to make that point inside, that I strongly dispute these findings. They were approved by the chief executive and a number of senior members of the board. And what's interesting in this is there's just a line near the end about how former senior staff members are watching closely to see what Mazars has to say about the role of Deloitte and Touche, obviously the FAI's long-time auditors, because where was the financial controlling going on? Like, you obviously had where a Tony Dagnan, whether it was his role or not, did not feel in a position to question where certain payments were going out, and obviously then what was the role of the auditors. So it's one to watch, but I mean the bottom line here, I suppose there's two. The FAI obviously just cannot allow something like this happening again. It's obviously in the process of reforming. Yeah. And then what's also telling, you'd have to say, is as you just pointed out, Joe, that a number of prominent people have declined to be interviewed in this investigation. And so you've got a fair play to Mark Tighe and Paul Rowan continuing to chase this story. But as Vincent alluded to there, it's had collateral damage to people.
Yeah. Well, we'll await the publication of the full report. And Deloitte, if you might remember, back when they were speaking about this thing, they had said that in their opinion, and it was their opinion, they felt they were misled by the FAI in terms of the accuracy of.
You see, this is where I have a problem with Deloitte, and your job is to make sure you're not misled, Joe. That'd be my view of what an auditor's job is, and I think maybe the most interesting quote in this story, and I agree with Kieran, Paul Rowan and Mark Tighe are playing a blinder on this, but there's an unnamed FAI executive who said on Friday, John was out of control and the board wasn't able to or didn't want to reel him in. We were paid employees. if you are told to do something, you do it or you leave, and you wouldn't get a job in football in Ireland again. So this was an organisation that it seems was run without any effort at proper governance. And I just think this story is going to run and run and run because, as Kieran points out, Delaney did not cooperate with the Hazard's investigation. Michael Cody, the former honorary secretary, hasn't. Five people in total have declined to be interviewed. The story is about an organisation that was rotten to the core, really.
Yeah, well, there'll be months ahead of FAI talk, I suspect. Let's move on to a few other pieces. We'll come to Eamon Sweeney's back page. I know, Kieran, you picked that out in a moment. But first, Paul Kimmage on Michael Bamberger. Vincent, Michael Bamberger, a journalist, Sports Illustrated, has written several golf books, including a new one on Tiger Woods. You made the point, we were talking by WhatsApp earlier, that even this just got you reminiscing to an extent. I know you were there last year to see Tiger Woods win the Masters, and almost a reminder that we should be gearing up for that again.
Yeah, and you would have thought that, we'd be wearying of reading about Tiger Woods. Michael Bamberger has just written a new book, The Second Life of Tiger Woods, and you would be kind of thinking, well, we know all we need to know. Now, the idea of a journalist interviewing a journalist might seem perverse to some people. I think this is a really interesting piece. Anyone who knows Bamberger, he's a brilliant writer. He's written some phenomenal books, but there's a really, if you bear in mind the Masters was next week,
pretty much,
starting Thursday week, and right now we'd be getting into the midst of Rory and the career Grand Slam, and Lowry going there as a major winner, and there'll be a real energy about the place. Like Dermot Gilleese has a piece in about Seve and how Seve conquered Augusta, and I suppose the psychological demons that we suspect will always be at the heart of Rory's bid to win a career Grand Slam there. But what I find very interesting is Bamberger was working on this book about Tiger before the Masters last year, and you would imagine then anyone with dollar signs in their head would be thinking, please let Tiger win and I'll make a fortune. And that wasn't the case at all, because he's a journalist who finds Tiger Woods pretty cold, and I suspect considers him a bit of a sociopath, and he's interviewed him once and once only. But Paul asks him, I presume you were rooting for Tiger to win, and he says, I was rooting for Molinari. He's my favourite golfer. I like the way he goes about his business, and was heartbroken for him. But as someone who was there, Joe, and I suppose I was one of those writing about how there was a more human side to Tiger when he won, and the emotion of seeing him with his kids and that, Bamberger makes a very good point. He says, I'm looking for character to reveal itself, and I'm interested in losers. What would reveal Tiger's character more in that scenario? Okay, so he made a bogey on 18 and won by 1. Let's say he makes a double on 18 and loses the playoff. Then we would have really seen something. I wouldn't have wished that on him, because I don't believe in that kind of rooting, but we would have gotten a real insight into where he was. It was extremely interesting to see how he handled victory after all those years, but winning is easy. It would have been much more interesting to see how he would have handled defeat. And I think that's a great observation, because, everybody seemed to be rooting for Tiger, and there was this outpouring of emotion when he won. The emotional scenario would have been much more complicated if he had lost, because there was this desperation almost to see him back on the mountaintop. And I think I've always been intrigued by this, that he's clearly, and we've spoken on this program before about it, he's clearly not a particularly likable person. And yet he's someone that you instinctively find yourself rooting for. But has he changed? There's no real evidence to suggest he has changed. And, after reading the interview, I have to say I'd be interested in reading the book.
Yeah, and the genesis of the book is very interesting as well, because he says, Vincent, that, he's covered Woods for a long time. not a fan of him. At one stage he says that he was cold-hearted. He had me in his bones. Whatever character defects he might have had, they were useful on Sunday afternoons, but did not like the character that Woods was. And so he talks about February 2018, Bamberger's out, he's covering the golf, Woods is back, he's had his spinal fusion, and he remembers a moment where Woods had played with Sam Burns, this 21-year-old kid, yet another talented kid trying to find a home in professional golf. Tiger's seen hundreds of them. So he says Woods was asked a boilerplate question about, you know, playing with this 21-year-old kid. What do you make of him? And he says if form held, Tiger would have offered some semi-impersonal scouting report about the kid and his 8th place finish. Instead, he says, Tiger gave this answer where he talked about the kid played beautifully. He said top 10's big for him. It gets him into Tampa next week. He's trying to build momentum. This was a big step for him. And Bamberger's a bit taken aback that, you know, Woods would even have cared enough to walk in Sam Burns' shoes to know that the top 10 finish would get him into the following tournament the next week. And he writes, or he says to Paul Kimmage, you felt like asking somebody in Tiger's camp, what have you done with him? Because the old Tiger was not going to worry about Burns. And so Bamberger says he watched Woods closely a week later in Tampa. He watched him differently, followed him to the Masters, the Open at Carnoustie and so on. And then he says he called his editor and he said, you know what, I think I'd like to write a book on what Tiger is trying to do here. And he finishes by saying, Vincent, you know, he's asked, has Tiger changed? This kind of question people have been asking of late, or is it some PR stunt? And he says of his conclusion, look, this is a snapshot of this period. There'll be more to say when he leads a full life. And Paul says if he continues this path. And Bamberger says, yes, perfect, if he continues this path. And the one thing I would caution fans of second chances, fans of Tiger saying, oh, this is the new Tiger, I would urge them not to go there yet. I would urge them to say, like all of us, he's a work in progress. Don't put pressure on him or your expectations to think he's anything other than that. So Bamberger, almost, Vincent, has noted that this is a moment in time where something potentially interesting is happening with Woods, but the jury is still out.
Yeah, and the way to judge that was not, you know, on Sunday night in Augusta last year, where he was obviously going to be charming and pleasant to everybody, or even in terms of that, you know, Sam Burns there and the interest he would never have shown previously in a young golfer trying to make it there. What I didn't realise, Joe, was that Bamberger knew, and Paul has this in where Bamberger knew the story was breaking in November 2009 about the woman in the nightclub in New York, because the story was basically being offered for $25,000, and he, you know, Paul writes, called to the main switchboard of Time Inc. in Manhattan and was put through to Sports Illustrated. SI was a Time Inc. publication. Jim Hare, Bamberger's editor, took the call. The woman had a friend who was having an affair with Tiger Woods. Her friend would sell the story for $25,000. Hare told the woman that wasn't really Sports Illustrated's business, but he took her number and promised to get back to her then. Then he put Bamberger on the case. What would we do if we got it, Bamberger asked. I don't know, his boss replied, but I'd like to know. Bamberger tried the number, but the woman did not pick up. She had done a deal with the National Enquirer. So you knew almost from the beginning, Paul asks. Yeah, he replies, but I wasn't going to write it. Would you write it? So it's just interesting. I think people like Bamberger, who clearly has watched Woods and his, if you like, ambivalence to the rules, and he has a history of a less than noble history, I suppose, if you like, of trying to bend the rules. And, you know, it's like he's saying, I'm comfortable pushing this rule and it's your job to tell me I can't. That's another line. And I just think it's very interesting because right now we will be gearing up for another round of McIlroy and Tiger and all these, Brooks Koepka and all of these. And, of course, that's all on hold for now. But Woods will never be less than interesting in my view.
No, I know, it's true. I mean, I like you, I thought, well, I've read everything I need to read on Woods, but I might be digging out this new book now in the coming weeks. Before we depart, lads, Eamon Sweeney, you wanted to touch on, Kieran, on the back page of the Sunday Independent.
I just thought it was a good, strong back page where he called out the horse racing industry for proceeding like business as normal. Well, not business as normal as in it was behind closed doors, but they still kept going. And it was just for a general sports writer to call it up. I'm not particularly off horse racing, albeit I agree with a line in Eamon's piece about the humility of the jockeys. I have been struck by that whenever I've had dealings with them. But Eamon has said like how he is into horse racing, but he thought it was a terrible call. I thought it was no harm for that to be called out. And he has a couple of good off leads as well. A nod to the late John O'Leary, and also then to the Italian international rugby player who has chipped in, helping out with the ambulance service. Going back to, just to bring it all, I suppose, full round, we were talking about Tom Devine earlier. So I thought in a slow week, it's I remember when I used to be a full-time GA in the J with the Tribune, where we would say the measure of a car will be what they're writing in the winter, the off season. Nearly, this is a test of what writers are coming up with, and I thought Eamon passed the test well there today with those 3 pieces.
Okay. And you said at the outset, as we begin to wrap up, you weren't sure about whether or not you wanted to write about sport at the moment. What side of that dilemma have you come down on?
I know. Well, you're going to go. You're still going to be writing. I'll be continuing the column, and I'm writing a book at the moment. But it's you'll just be whether you write about COVID-19 related stories. You're going to be going back and forth, touching on it. Some stuff will then won't be directly, just like the Michael Bamberger piece we were just talking about that Paul did today wasn't. So you'll be going back and two, because look, it's not just the elephant in the room. Yeah, you've got to, I'll be writing about it again for sure in the coming weeks. But it's unavoidable. I just, while we finish up, and I know it was a Saturday piece, but I thought Vincent's piece yesterday with the great AK Alan Kelly was great. All of humanity was touched upon, including the current crisis, the various things that Alan has had. We were talking about Michael Dagnan and reevaluating things when things come back to normalcy. I thought it was a great piece, Vincent. You write many a good piece with Alan through the years, but it was a beautiful piece, and I suggest people get to look it out. It was as good as I've read this weekend, anyway.
Well, thanks, Kieran. But it's down to Alan. You couldn't fail with him. He's so eloquent and so wise, I think, in my view.
Fellas, we are just about out of time. My thanks to both of you for getting up the extra hour as well, getting up and getting out and getting the papers and getting home and reading them. Vincent for setting up a Skype account, and then for having to go on the phone. My thanks to you as well. Much appreciated. Stay safe. And Kieran Shannon of the Irish Examiner and Vincent Hogan of the Irish Independent will leave it there. Thanks again, fellas.
Okay, Joe. So good to see you.